Hello and welcome to our video presentation on critical theory and cultural studies. In this module, we'll be discussing on the following: Marxism versus critical theory versus cultural studies. Under it is Marxism versus critical theory versus cultural studies, and Marxism versus critical theory versus cultural studies. Second is contention and power relations. Under it is political discourse, intercultural communication, contention, power relations, and contenders and the core of their contentions. Lastly will be contending parties, and under it will be intercultural models and theories.
For the first part, we will be comparing and contrasting Marxism with critical theory with cultural studies, and the three with each other. Marxism is a social and economic system based upon the political and economic theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. It gives rise to socialism and communism, which are two societal structures, the latter coming from the former. Marxism emphasizes class struggle between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat, the former being exploitative of the latter. Its main goal is to give freedom of individuals in the proletariat from ideological control and illusion by the ruling class. Critical theory, on the other hand, is a social theory which aims to dig beneath the surface of social life and uncover the assumptions that keep us from a full and true understanding of how the world works. It focuses on democracy as the location for cooperative, practical, and transformative activity, which continues today in the work of Jürgen Habermas. It provides the descriptive and normative basis for a social inquiry, which is aimed at decreasing domination and increasing freedom in all their forms. Their key similarity is their aim of toppling the capitalistic ruling class and social structure in order to achieve their individual goals of freedom.
Now let's compare critical theory with cultural studies. Let's discuss about critical theory first. Critical theory is a social theory and approach oriented toward critiquing and changing society as a whole. Critical theories aim to dig beneath the surface of social life and uncover the assumptions that keep human beings from a full and true understanding of how the world works. A critical theory aims to achieve democracy and freedom in all forms. It has a distinctive objective: to unmask the ideology falsely justifying some form of social or economic oppression, to reveal it as ideology, and in so doing, to contribute to the task of ending that oppression. And so, a critical theory aims to provide a kind of enlightenment about social and economic life that is itself emancipatory. Persons come to recognize the oppression they are suffering as oppression and are thereby partly freed from it. On the other side of the diagram is the cultural studies. In cultural studies, culture serves as an object and location. Cultural studies is not simply the study of culture, as though it was a discrete entity divorced from its social or political context. Its objective is to understand culture in all its complex forms and to analyze the social and political context within which it manifests itself. Culture and cultural studies always performs two functions. It is both the object of the study and the location of political criticism and action. Cultural studies aim to be both an intellectual and a pragmatic enterprise. Cultural studies is a multi-approach, innovative, interdisciplinary field of research. It draws on methods and theories from literary studies, sociology, communication studies, history, cultural anthropology, and economics. It also investigates social relations. It aims to examine its subject matter in terms of cultural practices and their relation to power. Its constant goal is to expose power relationships and examine how these relationships influence and shape cultural practices. Cultural studies also address new questions and problems of today's world. Rather than seeking answers that will hold for all time, cultural studies develop flexible tools that adapt to this rapidly changing world. For their similarity, both critical theory and cultural studies derive from Marxist approaches to society and culture, but have expanded to engage a broad range of theoretical and methodological areas.
Since we have already discussed Marxism, critical theory, and cultural studies from each other, we will now be discussing their similarities. Marxism and critical theory both aim to topple capitalism, while critical theory and cultural studies both originated from Marxism. The similarities between the three is that first, their main goal is emancipation from a society dominated by a ruling class. And second, they also aim to drive change in society or its structure, focusing on the political hegemony as its subject for change.
Now that we have discussed on the matters of Marxism, critical theory, and cultural studies, let us now proceed to the next topic of interest from Communication 10, and that is contention, or in other words, power relations. However, before we discuss on this central issue of our video presentation, let us review again the concepts of both political discourse and intercultural communication, since both ideas are pertinent to contention and/or power relations. Political discourse, basically, is a text characterized by its theme of expression of political ideas that are considered in political communication. Thus, it comprises the entirety of participants involved in the political process. One may say that this only encompasses politicians and other political associates. However, this type of discourse is also distinguished by its authors and actors of different backgrounds, such as the fellow citizens and voters. Moreover, political discourse is seen as a form of political action. Alternatively, it also serves as a form of social action or interaction amongst its participants. This explains why it has the ability to influence or become influenced by citizens alike, or collectively, the public opinion. In turn, ICC gives rise to a wide range of communication issues within a group of people with varying societal conditions or characteristics. As a result, these influential individuals undergo negotiations with one another through shared meaning via interactions or social action. This will then enhance the ability of understanding one's own identity, not only cultural but also personal and social identity, as one tries to converse with other cultural personalities to solve miscommunications and mishaps. For example, take conferences and symposiums of the United Nations. It is already a given that the people involved in this multifaceted discussion would be coming from different cultural backgrounds, ethnicities, religions, and many more. Consequently, they would have to conduct well-structured discussions and discourses in order to negotiate with one another and settle their differences to come up with a consensus. Even though intercultural communication is seen as a powerful and beneficial idea, it can actually be inhibited by several factors such as the following: ethnocentrism, stereotyping, prejudice, and discrimination. Now that we have briefed through the major pertinent topics for our central issue, let us now proceed to the core of this module: contention and power relations. Additionally, it is also labeled as point of contention in some contexts. Fundamentally, contention actually has two definitions: pragmatic and specialized. Its pragmatic definition states that it is a competition for resources that are essential in networks that undergo and perform communication. On the other hand, its specialized definition corresponds more to its relationship with the two previous discussed ideas, especially ICC. Critically, contention is a situation wherein communication patterns of one field are in conflict with communication patterns of another field. A pertinent example would be the intercultural literature review reports in internet studies through ethos conditions. If it were to interact or associate itself with other fields, such as ICC, then it would lead to problems or issues in cross-cultural interactions, signaling a strong point of contention. As it can be synthesized from the said exemplar, it can be understood how contention can be alternate or replaceable with the term power relations, since it is a complex interaction with intercultural communication. However, only a few would acknowledge this serious imbalance of power and its repercussions. To further explain, let us consider some historical contenders that exemplify and exhibit such power relations, while identifying the core of their contention.
In international relations, a surface or even superficial global culture is said to be coming into existence for a variety of reasons, from the need to address economic and environmental problems which may only be solved by the efforts of all. In short, International relations are becoming more like what we understand as domestic political relations, but the intercultural differences are to such an extent that they cannot be ignored. The most obvious contenders in the regard of religion are the Christian faith and the word of Islam. Stretching from Morocco to the Philippines have an obvious clash, especially with the efforts of the faithful to rediscover or revive its own transnational religious and political way, then towards God, and away from the material corruption of this world. Clashing among the contenders is very problematic, if not controversial and violent. The faith is divided into at least two confessions, the expression of both underlain by strong cultural differences and overlain by different degrees of accommodation with modernity. For the first core contention of cultural differences and hate crime, Christians are more divided than Muslims, and some would say increasingly so because of intersectionality, which is why these Christians have great identity problems, causing people to be more isolationist and racist. The most common form of intercultural communication that happens is of hate and animosity. The way some Christians treat the majority of Muslims is very hateful and has been proven to promote hate crime, according to Dominique Cassiani, a BBC Affairs correspondent. In the 2016 Brexit ordeal, terrorism incidents triggered short-term spikes in hate, wherein abuse was seen more often in the streets, mostly caused by Caucasian individuals. Patterns like this are easily observed even more so after the 9/11 attack in New York. With the second core contention of modernity and unfair treatment, with concerns of modernity, the Islam and Christian faith have olden values when dealing with the LGBT people and their treatment of women, which they have been heavily criticized for by minorities of different cultures. According to Heiner Bielefeld, a UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion or belief, one big concern with the Islamic world is concerning the views of human rights. Some Islamic people do not understand the right to consensual sex outside of marriage and individual freedom of speech and political opinion, which some parts of Sharia law allegedly violate, which many liberal Christians do not support, while some conservative Muslims hate on Christians for allowing different liberties to exist, with their displays of loving gay people, allowing people to divorce, and other more progressive ideals.
After knowing about contention or power relations, let us now examine if the contending parties can ever come to terms, or if their respective interests are in irreconcilable opposition. To answer this, let us discuss the three ICC models as described by Samovar: compositional model, developmental model, and co-orientational model. There are three basic components that are presented in the compositional model. These components, namely attitudes, knowledge, and skills, represent the conceptual elements of intercultural communication. In the case of the contending parties, the difference in the knowledge and skills that they possess causes the further divide between the parties in terms of their values and beliefs, producing antagonistic interests which would then be manifested in their attitudes. Hence, using the compositional model, the respective interests of the contending parties are in irreconcilable opposition. In contrast to this is the co-orientational model, which emphasizes reaching a common ground on the symbolic meanings the contending parties believe in. In this model, the process of intercultural communication would result in a greater commonality of meaning, understanding, accuracy, or mental content. Therefore, if the communication process is competent enough, the contending parties would achieve reconciliation in accordance with the co-orientational model. On another hand, the developmental model focuses on the chronological process of change in which a culture conforms to another culture. Through this model, the contending parties may seem to be in an irreconcilable position at first, but will soon reach commonality as one culture adapts to the other. For example, in power relations, the minor culture may soon conform to the dominant culture, or the minor culture may expand and establish itself in the mainstream.
That concludes our video presentation on critical theory and cultural studies. Thank you for watching.